Today's deck is probably the closest deck I have constructed so far on this channel that could be actually characterized as a troll deck, due to its general dependency on loops to produce victory. Does it need a loop to produce victory? No, but the probability of winning without the loop is rather low. So let's explore the concept of building a Jackpot 7 deck. Jackpot 7 is certainly a very strange card in the context of why it was even created in the first place. Its effect: when this card is activated, shuffle this card from the field into the deck. When this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, banish this card. If 3 of your Jackpot 7s are currently banished, and were all banished by this effect, you win the duel. You would think that cards of this nature would be frowned upon in general because their win conditions are so stringent that it limits creativity and fosters the development of large-scale continuous loops, just like the one for this deck. The loop is necessary, though, because clearly anyone can see from a consistency standpoint, relying on the opponent to drive the Jackpot 7 bus is irrational, for realistically, unless the opponent is running either a shotgun deck destruction or blindly destroys back row without limitation, your opponent will have almost zero ability to drive the winning condition for Jackpot 7. One could argue that a vampire type deck could also help drive the winning condition, but this assistance only manifests itself if your opponent is, well, let's just say dumb. Therefore, to design this deck, a system needs to be established where not only the possibility exists for activating Jackpot 7's effect, but it is also mandatory. To my knowledge, there is only one card in the game that meets this condition: Dark Scorpion Burglars. Burglars has the following effect: when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent's life points, your opponent selects one spell card from their deck and sends it to the graveyard. Then shuffle the deck. However, while the effect targets spell cards in the opponent's deck, this card clearly does not work when it's on your side of the field. Therefore, it needs to be placed on your opponent's side of the field. There are only a small handful of cards that achieve this effect that will be effective for this deck, with the most consistent being Creature Swap, Mystic Box, Xian Spy, and Give and Take. Looking at each of these cards, the general conditions for each are as followed. Creature Swap, Mystic Box, and Xian Spy all require Burglars to be on your side of the field, with Swap and Box also requiring an opponent's monster, whereas Give and Take requires Burglars to be in your graveyard and you to have at least one monster on the field. From a standpoint of the field switchers, Swap, Box, and Spy, Creature Swap is clearly the superior choice to either Box or Xian Spy, for even if the loop fails for some reason, you're giving your opponent a bad monster in Burglars, and you're typically going to get back a good monster for whatever your opponent decides to give you. When deciding between Mystic Box and Xian Spy, for me the choice is rather obvious. The advantage of Mystic Box is that your opponent's monster is destroyed. So, if something goes wrong and your opponent stops the loop in some way, your opponent is at least down one monster, and now they have Burglars on the field. And Burglars can still sit on the field, so you could try to hit the loop next turn or after that. However, I really wouldn't count on that, because Burglars being a level 4 means that your opponent's probably going to go into a rank 4XZ next turn, but it's still a possibility. The disadvantage of Mystic Box is that your opponent requires a monster, which is not very restrictive of a disadvantage. Xian Spy is generally the opposite. It does not require a monster, but there's really only one genuine opportunity to achieve the loop. Otherwise, Burglars returns to your side of the field, and Spy was wasted. In my opinion, Box is a better choice because the monster destruction significantly outweighs the very small potential of FTK granted by Spy, where you can actually go first and win on your turn right there before your opponent can even have a turn. Also, there will be times when the loop structure is unavailable, and the monster destruction associated with the box can significantly hinder your opponent's offensive capacity for a short period of time, whereas Spy does nothing. Therefore, overall I run 3 copies of Creature Swap and 3 copies of Mystic Box, and choose not to run Spy at all. Moving on, there are a number of card effects, both monster and non-monster, that help dump cards from the deck to the graveyard. So I like running 2 copies of Give and Take in this deck as a kind of a secondary backup plan for when I don't have Swap or I don't have Box, as well as running 3 copies of Oasis of Dragon Souls to put that Burglars on the field when I can. It basically just speeds up the deck in general. Running Oasis of the Dragon Souls is preferred over Call of the Haunted because whether or not Burglars is in attack or defense mode when it's switched to your opponent's side of the field is irrelevant, and sometimes other monsters other than Burglars will need to be summoned from the graveyard for defensive purposes, and this deck, life points are actually at a fairly high premium because of what's demanded of the loop, so you want to have those monsters in defense position rather than an attack position. You just take needless life point damage. There are still 2 further issues that must be addressed with this deck. First, how will Burglars be placed on the field or in the graveyard? What are these, numerous monster and non-monster effects that we're going to choose from? And second, how will Burglars inflict battle damage to activate its effect? Fortunately, both of these issues are rather easily managed. First, because Burglars is a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1500 attack or less, the additions of Mathematician, Armageddon Knight, Mystic Tomato, and Reinforcement of the Army dramatically increase the speed and utility of this deck by either getting Burglars into the hand from where it can be normal summoned onto the field, or dumping it into the graveyard. So I run 3 copies of Mathematician, 3 copies of Armageddon Knight, 3 copies of Mystic Tomato, and 3 copies of Reinforcement of the Army. Producing the necessary battle damage is best done through cards that can produce tokens with less than 1,000 attack points. Ideally, the centerpiece of the loop is to send all Jackpot 7s to the graveyard in one battle phase, limiting the ability of your opponent to remove Burglars from the field, ending the threat. This demand necessitates the use of token-producing cards that can special summon at least 3 tokens. When considering the requirements, the best token-producing card is Hippo Carnival. Not only does Hippo Carnival produce 3 tokens with 0 attack points, but also has the fantastic advantage of not restricting any further summons during the activated turn. Basically, the player can activate Hippo Carnival, normal summon a Burglar during the same turn, significantly increasing the probability of executing the loop. 3 copies of Carnival are a must in this deck. While Scapegoat produces an extra token, its summons restriction hurts its overall usefulness in this deck. Basically, with Scapegoat, you just have to wait a turn before you can pull off the loop. However, despite this summons restriction, the deck does need more opportunities to execute the loop, as well as to provide defense when the loop isn't immediately available. Thus I run 2 copies of Scapegoat. A somewhat sneaky good monster card in this deck is Battlin Boxer Veil. While initially the addition of Veil may seem out of place, there are at least 4 practical reasons for running it in this deck. First, it's a warrior, so it can be searched out by Reinforcement of the Army, making its additional advantages more probable. Second, in times of a bad opening draw, its innate special summoning ability can help set up XZ plays that offer an additional avenue to victory. Third, it can be special summoned after receiving any battle damage, whether self-inflicted or not. Thus, Veil acts as another opportunity to finish the loop. For example, consider the scenario where 3 tokens exist ready to slam into a Burglar, but the opponent wisely activates a Fiendish Chain in response to the first token, declaring an attack, leaving an incomplete loop. Without Veil, well, you have a decision to make. You can either attack with the 2 remaining tokens, destroy them, make your play on Jackpot 7, get 2/3 of the way there, and then hope you can somehow get rid of that 3rd card somewhere down the line, or you can just say, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything this turn. If you have Veil, it fills in for that lost token, as when the second token destroys itself by attacking into Burglar, you can then special summon Veil in attack mode with its 0 attack points, and then attack with a third token, then attack with Veil, finishing the loop. Fourth, and in my opinion most importantly, Veil helps restore life points. For the loop to work, the player will typically have to have more than 3,000 life points, because you're going to be typically slamming a 0 attack point something into a 1,000 attack point target. So that's going to be 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, there's your 3,000. Veil allows a player to survive a big shot earlier in the duel just in case you don't have the exact card you need early on, increasing the probability that the loop stays viable. So if an opponent hits you for 2,500, it's like, oh, that without Veil, that kind of hurts you. With Veil, well, I can just special summon Veil, get that 2,500 back, and the loop probability stays relatively valid. Closing out the spells, those who have watched other deck builds know that I don't like pigeonholing myself into devotion to a single strategy. I think that is what hurt decks like this or other single card themed decks. Unless the loop is a simple maximized draw loop for Exodia or something, pigeonholing is not really a good idea. In this vein, maximizing the single-minded efficiency of activating the Jackpot 7 loop would demand something like 3 copies of Upstart Goblin, effectively lowering the deck to 37 cards at no real cost, because the win condition is not based on life point reduction. However, I prefer to run 1 Raigeki, 1 Book of Moon, because there are times when achieving the loop will not occur early in the duel, and you have to manage the opponent's field. Otherwise, you're going to take so much life point damage that producing the loop becomes impossible, and you might as well just scoop. Also, with all of the other dark monsters in the deck, and the ability to quickly put them into the graveyard, and with the various levels of revival that you have some level of control of that graveyard, the addition of Dark Armed Dragon certainly makes sense, so I run 1 copy of Dark Armed Dragon. Dragon also serves as another path to victory if the loop doesn't come together in time. Now, some may argue that a critical flaw in this deck is the lack of a trap negator like Trap Stun or Wiretap. This is a valid point, but I have not had many problems with this deck in regards to the lack of that stun card. The opponent typically, in the first duel, they don't know what's happening. There are a number of duelists that haven't even seen Jackpot 7, and let alone remember what it does, so, when you're slamming tokens into them, they're like, I don't know what's going on, and suddenly, oh, I win. What? Huh? So, in the main deck, a negator really is irrelevant. So if you want to side a few just in case your opponent's going to get wise, then that's fine, but overall, I really haven't had a huge problem, first duel, second duel, or even third duel, with opponents flipping over Fiendish Chains or Mirror Forces to destroy my tokens. Again, because we aren't trying to pigeonhole the deck into a single strategy, we do need to create an extra deck. Typically, this extra deck is probably of little real consequence, but it is an important element to having it in general is an important element to maximizing victory probability. With that said, my extra deck is as followed. First, I run an increased number of the 4 rank 4 staples. I run 1 Exciton Knight, 2 number 101s, 2 Castels, 1 XZ Dragon. I run 1 Diamond Direwolf. I'm not a huge fan of Diamond Direwolf because I think it's somewhat wasteful, but in this deck where you have all these beast tokens to play with, it's a strong card. Run 1 Antiluminscent Knight, 1 number 80 Rhapsody, 1 Gagaga Samurai. It's double attack, 1900, help you get that extra life point damage, especially if you've been able to also get dark armed on the field at the same time. 1 Gagaga Cowboy, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 number 82 Heartland Draco, and because of the Mathematicians, I run a couple rank 3s, 1 number 30 Acid Golem, and 1 number 47 Nightmare Shark. It's important to note that for the purpose of the loop, a smart play strategy is to set Burglars instead of summoning it, because neither Creature Swap nor Mystic Box require that the switched monster needs to be in attack position or even face up. Setting Burglar heavily limits the opponent's ability to respond, and with a defensive power above 0, attacking into a face-down Burglars with your tokens, it'll still trigger the overall effect. Overall, in my opinion, I think this is probably the best troll deck in the game that does not rely on banned cards or cards that should be banned. Well, that's my Jackpot 7 deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.